All right. Bryce, you are the first box. What you got?
I got here first. I'm not used to this. Um, I've got documentation stuff. A lot of it was like I've been trying to get better about balancing it throughout the week. Um, but I also only had about half the week to work because a lot of it was for other meetings and stuff. But a decent amount of improvements to and just like more polishing on the AL income modules, and I've got two little uh, I have two um, like tutorials, one for expenses and one for the AL jobs up. I'm working on the itemized jobs, and I also maybe wanted to get in AL income, although I might just call it for like once I get the itemized jobs and put it up, and then see if that's the right way to go about it. Since I mostly did like really sparse, like here's a little about the class and some of the attributes, but focused mostly on here's how you make a small interview with all of these things, and here if you want to change this part, you can do this, and all these other sort of stuff. And I focused on that sort of stuff. And I think the only thing that like was blocked, not really blocked on, but like had a question for y'all for was so right now, if you are filling out your job and you're just using the toolkit, and you say you're self-employed, there's no way to like actually like sorry, not going to be even more. Jobs have like they have like all the like income you actually make from that job, and then they have your employer's information also associated with the same object. And so there's a question screen that's like, tell us about your employer, and there's a checkbox that you can check that says I'm self-employed. Right now, like there isn't a good way to get someone's information if they say they're self-employed because
So
we're using the toolbox.
To kind of add to that, if you're self-employed, you would set the employer information to be if the user is self-employed, you'd set the employer information to be the user information.
Well, that's what you could do,
Or
but
you could.
But if you're just like filling out a job by itself, the user information isn't directly associated with it all the time, and especially if it's only in the toolbox where we aren't using all of the other assembly line stuff. We're just using stuff in the toolbox. All that to say, like if we're using assembly line, we can get it to work well. If you have like jobs as an attribute of that user, that works fine. But just for a default, if someone's just using the toolbox, I wanted to ask like Quentin or Caroline, because I know y'all work on a lot of these forms like that. Does it make sense to fill out the employer's name to just be like self-employed? And so if that employer's name ended up on a form, it would just be a question of like, tell us about your employer, and it would just show up self-employed. And it sort of assumes that somewhere else on the form is the person's like full contact information and whatever they would want from the employer. Is that a reasonable assumption to make? Is there a better option for if like you can't like not you could but like programmatically we can't come up with a better default and automatically get the user's information? Is there a better way of just writing that they're self-employed, or like writing what their address or the employer's address or phone number is in that case?
I think it makes sense to do what you're suggesting is just put in self-employed. Don't put in all the employer information. Don't put in if I'm self-employed, don't put in my information in the employer section. I think if you put self-employed, because my information is going to be somewhere else on the form. Yeah. I mean, that's my thought, because I also think for people who are looking at these forms, they need to think, oh, this information in the employer matches the users, and it's like extra cognitive burden for the reader of the form, and the user of the person who's submitting the form already knows that. So if the person who's reading who needs the form at the court or wherever sees in the employer information self-employed, and I think typically that's often the way. I think that's often the way it works anyway. You just tick a box, self-employed, because you have the information about the person on another form. That's my first thought.
So
Okay.
you're saying it would
Agreed.
be good or it would be bad to leave it to say self-employed? Because you said it takes a lot of work for the reader to
Have the name
understand
say
it.
self-employed, but don't repeat any of the details
Right.
about the person.
Yes, the rest of the lines would be blank.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's actually an easier solution because I was doing more complicated stuff and setting that to be the person's
No,
information.
I think that makes a lot more sense to do that. What I was saying, the burden is the person who's reading the form, not submitting the form, but reading the form, then has to do the burden of matching all the employer information with the person who's filled it out
Is it-
information. They shouldn't
is
have to do that.
Is it worth, when using the assembly line project, to have a default question that sets the self-employed employer to the user information, or should it also just say self-employed?
I think it should just say self-employed.
Yeah, it just seems to me like the employer information is not relevant if someone says they're self-employed. So it's
Yeah.
more confusing to provide it than helpful.
Cool.
Okay, so we can, yeah, we don't even have to
Yeah, that makes it
add
easy.
that to the assembly line.
Okay, that sounds
So
good.
yeah,
down
we
the-
can
the only
comment
thing
on
I
that
can think
issue.
of-
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I mean, down the line, possibly, if you're self-employed, you may have a business name, right? But my feeling is I would wait in terms of developing anything in AL assembly line for that, because we don't have that need right now. And I think we ought to wait and see how people use it out there and see if they need to put in a business name. We don't I haven't seen that on any court forms. I haven't seen the 10,000 court forms in the form fixer,
You
but
could also put the business name on the job and like make it easy to ask that additionally.
yeah, I'm just
Like
saying.
in
let's
the
not-
in the
I'm just saying
future,
this
we
is a
don't have to do it
possible
now. Yeah.
I want to just, note that we're thinking about it, but that we're decided it doesn't make sense to try and come up with some kind of solution before we know what people need.
I agree. I think all the stuff we've been using it for and that I can see it being used for is like, you need the information to verify their income is likely what it's going to be used for. And I can't imagine they need the business name by itself unless like the business name is somehow a part, like not a party, but like somehow involved in a case, at which point this is not the class for that. This is a different thing.
Yeah, right. This is, yeah. And I mean, I know that New Hampshire, neither New Hampshire nor Massachusetts asks for business name on their financial statement, and they're pretty, nor does Alaska.
Okay.
So at this
Okay.
point, unless somebody else, maybe that's the thing to ask at grant partners.
Yeah, and that's sort of like I think what the plan is. I'll add this for a default, and I'll like document it, and then I'll let everyone at Grant Partners know, and they'll start using it, and they'll be like, actually, we have XYZ, and if it seems like a very weird way, I'll sort of write out how they can have their own things. But if it seems like it could be more general, then we can bring it into our own library. Okay, cool. That's the only like blocker thing, and that's a very simple resolution to the problem. Thanks. That's all I got.
All right. Michelle.
Well, I already said about not solving the Ale Kiln signature screenshot issue. But if anyone wants to help me do math on constraining scaling based on ratio by height, let me know. Yeah, it's dense. I understand that sentence was very dense.
Is that for CSS or for something else?
It's for DocAssemble, DocAssemble's signature canvas. I think that would mean that how I was describing to you when the screen gets too short, when the canvas gets too short, how it cuts off, it hides part of the signature.
Mm-hmm.
That might help with that. But yeah, other than that, I think I'm all set for right now. Oh, I made changes to the document download table, the download page HTML table. So I made updates there if people want to, on that PR, want to check them out.
right.
They can always be better, but they are what they are at the moment.
It seems like an evergreen comment. They can always be be better. Doesn't matter what they are.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, cool. Quentin.
Everybody, let's see, like Bryce this week, coming back from traveling was a lot of meetings, front loaded with a lot of meetings. But at ITC, our PDF rating tool, Rate My PDF, got really good reception. And yesterday's we had some feedback from Pew about all the ways they're already trying to use it and want to spread it to more folks. So I'm just trying to implement some of those, the low-hanging fruit, especially leaning into the idea of what are things we can give. First, I just did some time refactoring it, so it's going to be easier for us to add text, explanatory stuff, have the templates not live inside the Python module. And so that's ready now. What I'm working on is having more actionable suggestions from the tool. So like we get the passive voice sentences right now, but all we do is give people a count. I'm working on like letting actually show here the sentences that are written in passive voice, which is already something we're getting, but we were just discarding. Similarly with the difficult words, actually showing what are the words that are difficult, little things like that we can do. And I might see if I can go as far as adding in a table of replacement words to match the difficult words. Some of them won't be difficult words, like things like receive, changing to get. I don't know if that'll count as a difficult word outside of the most common 2000 words, but there are places where there's tables of words, like on the US government's plainlanguage.gov. I'm going to see if we can just kind of use those in some places to simplify. Give some people really concrete suggestions.
I don't have it, but I think a good addition to that, which I don't think would be difficult, is where when you get to the point where you're listing the passive sentences, people really struggle just with the concept of passive. They just don't get it. And what I'm thinking is if we could find a really good resource just to here's a reminder of what passive is or something, because if we just say passive, people are just going to panic and just not. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do with it. And from our plain language little sessions with your students, they still don't get it. We don't explain it to them. They still don't get it. I mean, unless you speak a language where you like Russian or I don't know, Latin, where you really understand what passive is, people don't. So I think we ought to add to that is maybe, and I'll try and find something that I think actually the best, to my mind, the best explanation of passive is that woman, her name, it's the high value writing lady. And she does a little tutorial on passive. And I think that's really helpful.
Okay.
And Quentin, if we're going to make those discoverable to folk, if we were confident that they were actual full sentences, that it was, that it was showing back out, that might be the type of thing where we might want to add a button that says, make some suggestions, and we could use GPT to rewrite an active.
That would be fantastic.
Rewrite an active, but I wouldn't make it the default because of the fact that it's,
it costs us a penny.
Costs money. Yeah. But if we could make a heuristic that said like this definitely actually looks like a sentence, and then give them an option to actively call it, I think that would be a good use of that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good idea to think about. It might also be a place where we could drop down to the worst model too, right? So something.
We could try it and see how well it is.
Yeah. Because what's interesting is like the current passive voice detection is an untrained version of Spacey, and it does really well. It does like 98%.
Yeah, I would keep doing that for use Spacey for all the stuff we can use it for.
Yeah, I was going to say I think
I don't know
actually
if it has the feature to rewrite it though. Sorry.
Yeah,
I don't think it does.
I was looking through that when we were talking about it to see if there was a feature to rewrite. I do think it's fairly when I was doing some of this last week or 2 weeks ago, when I was looking at it, it looked like it was generally fairly good about only marking it for like full sentences. But it's always worth it to double check.
Yeah. Our tokenization, we're using NLTK to tokenize the sentences from a big block of text. I noticed a few times where it groups 2 sentences and thinks it's one sentence, but it's pretty good at not knowing things are sentences. And we're skipping ones that are shorter than 2 words as well.
Okay. That's a good heuristic.
Yeah. 2 words or shorter, rather. Shorter than 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that would be a good use. That's when we start, and at some point because I actually did some experimenting, Sid and I actually did some experimenting when we were together a couple weeks back about having it rewrite larger chunks in plain language, and had reasonable success with that. You would never want it to be, it's just like with language, machine language translation. You would never want that to be the final product without someone reviewing it, but it can be a very nice, get something there.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
That also might be a good.
And that one, I think that one's already in Form Fixer.
Yeah, it's in there. We're not using it yet, though, right?
We're not using it, but I'm not even sure if I say in the active voice in that one. It might already have the active, but we can find a prompt that would work.
Like the grade level.
Yeah, that one I think just at the grade level. But
yeah, I was gonna say, I couldn't. Well, on the topic, you had made a comment that for like doing a similar thing for the citations, like just the legal citations, because right now iCite finds that there's the paragraph marker and then gives you 0 context around it, which is a little frustrating. But you said that you had like emailed them directly. Do you think that we should make a issue? Is it worth us trying to look into? I spent probably too long trying to look at the library and figure out how it worked, only to realize it was essentially looking for a large number of hard-coded, like, this is what the Massachusetts strings look like. But it doesn't have like all of them. And a lot of the ones that like looked like were in forms aren't anywhere near going to be like close, because there's not enough information around them, because they're not actual citations. They're just like, obviously
they're short sites as opposed to full sites.
Yeah.
Maybe what we could, it misses a lot of citations because state level forms often use the shorthand form for the citation, which it's not smart enough to know about, because they wrote it to analyze case law, not to do like kind of more informal documents. But still, like, it's better than nothing, I think. But I think one thing we might be able to easily do is just we already are tokenizing it into sentences. Can we find the sentence that has that symbol and list that if it's only one symbol? Or really, it's really just the section marker where it's like, that looks like a citation, because only citations use the little section symbol. We could just match the sentences that have those symbols. That'll probably get most of it that we need.
So here's a sentence with a citation.
Yeah.
Or you don't even have to say that. It's like, we think there's a citation in here, whatever here is.
Right.
Okay.
And cool. I would like to just acknowledge that there was another great evergreen in there, which was something's better than nothing. So if we pair those two together, we know that something's better than nothing, but it can always be better.
Yes. The other big thing, of course, with our...
Sorry.
Oh, well, I was going to just say, like, the other thing with our PDF rating tool, which Bryce and David already know, is like, we're going to tone down the amount, because we're working on this as beta. We have some big goals about giving people recommendations and rating and comparing, but people want to use it already for what it does now. So we just need to turn off the things that say, hey, here's a recommendation, or here's what we think the rating is, here's what we think how long it takes to answer is, and turn those into more generalized, like, hey, here's the complexity of the answering of this form based on what we know. And we're not going to call it number of minutes. We're just going to say it's a complexity rating or something like that.
Sorry, why do you want to do?
Yeah, why do you want to take it away?
Yet.
We've never tested the time it takes to answer. We just came up with guesses. So it's going to be, I feel like that's going to be a real easy place for people to critique us. They're like, wait a second, we tested this and you say it's going to take 5 hours, but when we tested all these forms, people took 1 hour to do.
In time, Caroline, in
Oh,
time.
I see.
The point is that right now people want to use something. So it's
Yeah.
MVP. And we want to give them something we're comfortable with.
We still do feel like we're going to have the right directional signals from like
Mhm.
this kind of answer is harder to do than this kind based on what
Yeah.
our heuristics are. We were thinking, oh, we want that to be a proxy for time. I don't think we can call it time until we've actually tested it.
I see, right, okay.
Yeah, I think we're.
Sometimes
Oh,
say words that people, it's just the language describing it makes it more confusing for people. Like that, right? Clearly, honest to God, when Jeff Hogue and his student first did it and they had all the little smiley faces and the angry faces, that was my favorite tool. It was just so easy. And I hate seeing the scores, and I really mind it. I miss those smiley faces like anything. And it seems
I think we can still keep those because like what we're doing is we're getting means and we can have standard deviations. So we can say, hey, you're green, you're within.
You're on the right side of the standard D. You're on the right side of the curve.
I just think they totally wrecked it when they changed it to numbers.
The only problem is we do have to be a little careful at this stage about sort of weighing in on what we think is good, right? So sometimes there will be some things where we'll be clearly able to say like lower is good, but there are going to be some things like where on the spectrum something falls. It's hard to say what it's good. So it's like we've graded the
You can do one of
exams,
those.
but we haven't set the curve.
You can do
Because we
one
know
of
that
those
most court
slant-
forms are bad. So if we just say, oh, you're about average for a court form, that's not actually very good.
No.
Yeah. But
Well,
you
I
don't
mean-
have to make a sad face for the bad stuff. You could make a slanty mouth face if you.
It's like,
You know.
we can
So
only go
it's,
halfway.
so it's less.
Made up.
So it's less. You know.
Save the cringe for the
clearly
really,
We're
really
probably going to be
Right,
okay with saying anything worse than average is bad. The problem is going to be
Okay.
when we say things that are at average or above are good. That's
Yeah.
probably not going to be
We've-
true.
Okay.
I like to think about it like we've graded the exams, we haven't set the curve yet, right? So that's what we got to do. We got to calibrate and set the curve, but that'll be in the future. For some things we'll know right away, like Quinn said. Like,
I mean, I
Sorry,
feel
Bryce,
like pretty
I
good about things like
Talked over you, like
fewer passive voice sentences is better and things like that.
Yeah.
Like we can, those objective things we're going to be really clear about.
now I'm thinking of all these stupid little images you could have, which would not be politically correct. But
I was when I was the data scientist at the public defenders, I came up with a tool, and I remember I was trying to deal with the same problem, and I did something where like I can't remember, it was like on a scale of like meh to like whoa.
yeah.
And it was looking basically like at how far off, you know, from a standard D, from a mean something is. And it's like pay attention, or like or like so.
Well, I mean, it just goes to the thing is everybody doesn't want to work harder than they have to read anything, you know.
Yeah, the thing is there are some things that like are not necessarily, that are irreducibly complex sometimes, right? Like a long form might be long because it asks a lot of things it needs to know.
Sure.
So we just have to be careful about making it seem like we can say yay or nay when we're not ready to yet.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
guess yeah.
All right.
Speaking of it, we have the Michigan meeting to go to in 2 minutes. Or it might actually be worth us going to talk a little bit about like where our tool is now.
Can I come?
Yes.
Really?
Oh no, sorry.
Oh,
you
never
can't
mind. Yes to Quentin, no to me. Got
Yes, that's right.
it. All right.
I was looking at my calendar and I was like, yes, it's very soon. So
Anything else?
that
for Quentin,
that
or
works
is
out
Quentin
well,
done?
Quentin, because we actually had been asked to show off the tool today. So
Oh,
I was going to do that, but you can do that. So yeah.
Or Bryce.
Bryce, are you going
Or
to the
Bryce.
Michigan meeting too?
Are there any other issues left to talk about? Just saying that.
Caroline, didn't you have anything?
I wanted to I know you only have 1 minute. I wanted to ask you about the feedback on the server thing, because Jeannie's real bent out of shape about getting the feedback issues public.
Yes.
He does
So-
not want the feedback public. Is that what it is? Okay.
Yes. So I think
You don't
that was
have
one
to
of the
use
things I wanted to
GitHub.
see too. No, you don't have to. And I think I can send you. I think it's sort of. I added a ton of documentation things to my plate. Only got to the income stuff this week, but I can start taking a look at it, and it should be doing stuff by default. At the worst, it's like maybe 2 things you have to add to your config, and I'll tell you like where and how, and then it's just like go to this interview that's already installed when you install the GitHub feedback package, and then as long as you're logged in as an admin, you can look at all the different feedback for the interviews. It's pretty lightweight and not doing a ton of fancy stuff right now, but it should like show you everything.
Great.
And so I'll send you that specifically, and then at the same time copy paste that into a like documentation page and try and get that up.
Yeah.
So
Is it possible to use the GitHub, make a
All right, I've got to jump.
You gotta go. You all going?
Sounds like it.
Okay.
So
All right.
I guess we'll have to call this meeting short then.
I'm staying. So
All right,
Okay.
we'll stop the recording though.
Yeah.
Sorry to